Greetings, Seekers, and welcome once again to the Library of Divine Echoes. I'm your host, Christopher Little, and today we will be inspecting the Norse Pantheon and its application as a Hermetic framework for esoteric integration and spiritual mastery. In today's session, we are stepping into a profound frontier for spiritual development, one that provides a robust architecture for practitioners seeking deep metaphysical transformation. Conceptualizing the Norse Pantheon as a Hermetic framework is not a simple merging of ideas. It necessitates a meticulous synthesis of two distinct but highly complementary cosmological models. To build this framework, we will bring together two powerful esoteric forces. The Hermetic tradition, originating from late antiquity, this classical tradition posits the existence of a single divine mind and an intricately ordered cosmos governed by observable metaphysical laws. It focuses on the potential for spiritual rebirth through the acquisition of divine knowledge, or gnosis. The Norse mythos. Conversely, we will weave in the primal, highly dynamic, and vitalistic Norse Pantheon. This system is deeply embedded in the harsh realities of nature, the absolute weight of fate, and the endless, inevitable cycles of cosmic destruction and regeneration. By interpreting the Norse Pantheon through the rigorous analytical lens of Hermetic philosophy, a unique paradigm emerges. This approach effectively bridges the transcendent abstraction of Greco-Egyptian mysticism with the eminent practical vitality of Germanic paganism. It structures the chaotic and frequently terrifying elements of the Norse cosmos, allowing you to engage with the divine on multiple cognitive and spiritual frequencies. The primary objective of this episode is to exhaustively analyze the integrated framework, delineating its esoteric, spiritual, and divinatory applications. You can consider this analysis a comprehensive manual for best practices, designed to ensure that the integration of Hermetic principles and Norse archetypes facilitates genuine spiritual growth. By charting the intersections of these traditions, we will explore actionable methodologies designed to help you integrate the personality and elevate human consciousness, refine your intellectual and emotional agility, develop a resilient growth mindset to actively confront future challenges, cultivate harmony, abundance, and true holistic prosperity. We are taking ancient mythos and transforming it into an operative technology of the soul, harmonizing the microcosm of the individual with the macrocosm of the universe. Let us begin our descent into the profound architecture of this syncretism. The intersection of Western esotericism and Northern European mythology presents a profound frontier for spiritual development, offering a robust architecture for practitioners seeking deep metaphysical transformation. The conceptualization of the Norse Pantheon as a Hermetic framework necessitates a meticulous synthesis of two distinct but highly complementary cosmological models. Hermeticism, fundamentally a religious philosophical tradition originating from late antiquity, is constructed around texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a mythological syncretism of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. This classical tradition posits the existence of a single divine mind, an intricately ordered cosmos governed by observable metaphysical laws, and the ultimate potential for spiritual rebirth through the acquisition of divine knowledge, or gnosis. Conversely, the Norse mythos offers a primal, highly dynamic, and vitalistic pantheon deeply embedded in the harsh realities of nature, absolute fate, and the cyclical destruction and regeneration of the cosmos. By interpreting the Norse Pantheon through the rigorous analytical lens of Hermetic philosophy, a paradigm emerges that bridges the transcendent abstraction of Greco-Egyptian mysticism with the eminent practical vitality of Germanic paganism. The primary objective of this episode is to exhaustively analyze this integrated framework, delineating its esoteric, spiritual, and divinatory applications. This analysis functions as a comprehensive manual for best practices, ensuring that the integration of Hermetic principles and Norse archetypes facilitates genuine spiritual growth. Furthermore, it explores how the application of these syncretic methodologies enables the cultivation of harmony and abundance, empowering the practitioner to confront future challenges through the active development of a resilient growth mindset. By charting the intersections of these traditions, the analysis provides actionable methodologies for the integration of the personality, the refinement of intellectual and emotional agility, and the manifestation of true holistic prosperity. The endeavor to synchronize the Norse deities with established esoteric frameworks is a highly sophisticated process of mythopoetic engineering. It requires the adept to move beyond superficial understandings of the gods as mere anthropomorphic figures, recognizing them instead as complex hypostases of universal forces. Through the application of Hermetic methodologies, the chaotic and frequently terrifying elements of the Norse cosmos are structured, allowing the practitioner to engage with the divine on multiple cognitive and spiritual frequencies. This framework transforms the ancient mythos into an operative technology of the soul, designed to elevate human consciousness and harmonize the microcosm of the individual with the macrocosm of the universe. To fully comprehend the validity of mapping the Norse Pantheon onto a Hermetic framework, it is vital to examine the historical and allegorical precedents of mythological syncretism within Western esoteric traditions. Syncretism is not the haphazard blending of traditions. It is a highly intentional process of extracting core divine principles and resolving apparent contradictions to forge a unified, functional theology. A profound allegorical model for this type of esoteric integration can be observed in mythological narratives concerning the synthesis of disparate cultural pantheons. In complex mythopoetic lore, such as the constructed mythologies often analyzed by esoteric scholars, the creation of a unified pantheon frequently requires the intentional stripping of adversarial qualities from original deities. A prime allegorical example is the conceptual Alessian synthesis, a mythic narrative describing the fusion of elven, Eilid, and human, Nordic, views of the divine to create an integrated pantheon. In this allegorical framework, the architects of the new religion took gods from conflicting cultures and meticulously stripped out the aspects most concerned with fighting one another, thereby creating a stable, internally cohesive system. This allegorical process directly mirrors the task of the modern Hermetic practitioner attempting to integrate Norse paganism. The practitioner must identify the functional cognates between the Hermetic spheres and the Norse deities, synthesizing their attributes into a cohesive internal architecture. Just as the mythic synthesis resolved the draconic king of time with the world devourer to create a unified protector deity, the esoteric adept must resolve the rational principles of Hermeticism with the destructive, cyclical principles of Ragnarok. The following illustrates this allegorical methodology, demonstrating how opposing archetypal forces can be synthesized into functional, integrated esoteric concepts. Hermetic Elven allegory, Auriel, static time, transcendence. Norse primal allegory, Alduin, world eater, cyclical destruction. Synthesized esoteric principle, Akatosh, governing the ongoing flow of time. Functional application for the adept, integrating the understanding that spiritual growth requires both enduring structure and the destruction of obsolete forms. Hermetic Elven allegory, Julianus, abstract logic, law. Norse primal allegory, Junal, runic wisdom, hidden knowledge. Synthesized esoteric principle, the synthesis of reason and gnosis. Functional application for the adept, utilizing intellectual rigor, Hermetic study, to ground profound intuitive runic revelations. Hermetic Elven allegory, Kynareth, air, breath, serenity. Norse primal allegory, Kine, storm, vitality, war wives. Synthesized esoteric principle, the synthesis of breath and vital force. Functional application for the adept, regulating the nervous system through breathwork while maintaining the capacity for explosive vital action. Hermetic elven allegory, Zenithar, commerce, measured exchange. Norse primal allegory, Sun, the trials of strength, unyielding worth. Synthesized esoteric principle, the synthesis of value and worthiness. Functional application for the adept, understanding that true spiritual and material wealth requires both strategic exchange and the inner fortitude to prove one's worth. The integration of Northern European myth with Near Eastern and Greco-Egyptian esoteric systems possesses a deeply rooted historical pedigree. During the Renaissance, the proliferation of Hermetic texts translated by figures such as Marsilio Ficino and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola sparked a massive wave of esoteric synchronization across Europe. This intellectual climate fostered the development of what is known as Hermetic Kabbalah, a system that successfully integrated Hermetic principles, such as the law of correspondence, with Kabbalistic concepts like the Tree of Life and the Sephirot. This synthesis significantly influenced Western esotericism, shaping various spiritual movements and mystical inquiries for centuries. A specific historical iteration of this syncretic impulse applied directly to the Norse Pantheon is found in the work of Johannes Burius, a Swedish antiquarian and mystic who developed the Gothic Kabbalah. Operating under the direct influence of Ficino and della Mirandola, Burius proposed a radical interpretation wherein the primary deities of the Norse Pantheon corresponded directly to the hypostases of the Christian Trinity, a theological structure that had itself been extensively analyzed through Hermetic and Kabbalistic lenses. In Burius's occult teachings, Thor was identified with God the Father, Odin was likened to God the Son, and Freya was seen as the manifestation of the Holy Spirit. This demonstrates that the desire to map the Norse deities onto established mystical frameworks is not a modern contrivance, but a continuation of classical esoteric methodologies. Similar syncretic leaps are found outside the European landscape, such as in the works of the influential Islamic philosopher Ibn Arabi within the Sufi tradition, emphasizing that the quest for a universal, underlying divine architecture is a global, mystical phenomenon. Establishing the philosophical bedrock of the Hermetic Norse framework requires a detailed examination of how classical and modern Hermeticism conceptualizes the universe, and how the Norse mythos corrects certain imbalances inherent in extreme rationalism. The Kabbalion and the Seven Hermetic Principles. While classical Hermeticism relies heavily on treatises describing the emanations of the divine mind, modern esoteric practitioners frequently utilize the structural framework provided by the Kabbalion. First published in 1908 under the pseudonym Three Initiates and widely attributed to New Thought author William Walker Atkinson, the Kabbalion outlines the seven Hermetic principles: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. Although this text blends the traditional Hermetic language with New Thought ideology, it remains a highly effective matrix for analyzing and structuring cosmological systems. These principles are not mere philosophical abstractions, they are the operational laws of the universe that the adept must master. The principle of correspondence, famously summarized as above, so below, finds profound and literal resonance in the Norse cosmological structure of Yggdrasil. The world tree, with its 9 intersecting realms, serves as the ultimate map of both the macrocosm, the universe, and the microcosm, the human soul. Midgard, Earth, sits in the center, reflecting the divine structuring of Asgard above and the profound subconscious depths of Helheim below. By applying the 7 principles to the Norse mythos, the practitioner gains a set of practical tools for navigating the vast metaphysical landscape. The following details the application of the 7 Hermetic principles to the specific mythic structures of the Norse Pantheon. Hermetic principle: mentalism. Foundational definition: the all is mind, the universe is mental. Norse mythological and cosmological integration: Ginnungagap acts as the primordial void of pure potential, while the tapestry of word woven by the Norns represents the underlying mental fabric and fate of the cosmos. Hermetic principle: correspondence. Foundational definition: as above, so below, as below, so above. Norse mythological and cosmological integration: Yggdrasil, the world tree. This structure of the 9 realms maps identically onto the psychological structure of the human soul. Hermetic principle: vibration. Foundational definition: nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Norse mythological and cosmological integration: the continuous energetic friction generated by the meeting of Muspelheim, fire, and Niflheim, ice, the phonetic and vibrational power of the runes, Galdr. Hermetic principle: polarity. Foundational definition: everything is dual, everything has poles. Norse mythological and cosmological integration: the dynamic tension and eventual necessary integration of the Aesir, forces of structure and martial power, and the Vanir, forces of nature, fertility, and vitalism. Hermetic principle: rhythm. Foundational definition: everything flows, out and in. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. Norse mythological and cosmological integration: the absolute cycle of creation, stasis, the inevitable destruction of Ragnarok, and the subsequent cosmic rebirth. Hermetic principle: cause and effect. Foundational definition: every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. Norse mythological and cosmological integration: Orlog and the web of word, the absolute accumulation of past actions shaping present circumstances and guaranteeing future outcomes without exception. Hermetic principle: gender. Foundational definition: gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Norse mythological and cosmological integration: the interplay between the Allfather, Odin, active, intellectual, wandering pursuit, and the Allmother, Frigg, intuitive, structural, domestic holding of knowledge. A critical challenge in applying Hermeticism to pagan frameworks is the tension between rationality and irrationality. The heavy influence of Platonism and Neoplatonism on Western occultism birthed the prevailing notion that God, and by extension the cosmos, is inherently rational. In Platonism and Hermeticism, the first emanation from the divine is nous, mind, followed by the logos, word or reason, through which the world is spoken into existence. While this framework is structurally useful, perceiving the divine as wholly rational is frequently a projection of human values onto an unfathomable cosmos. If a practitioner expects the universe to adhere strictly to an internally consistent philosophical framework, they inevitably filter out everything that fails to fit neatly into that paradigm. The history of mysticism demonstrates that direct encounters with the divine frequently feel like madness, and such experiences are consistently associated with madness in the same Hellenistic sources that birthed Hermetic philosophy. The profound psychological struggles of Carl Jung during the visions recorded in his Red Book perfectly exemplify this clash. Jung thought he was losing his mind and struggled deeply to reconcile his profound mystical visions with his established values of rationality, scientific thinking, and his desire to be taken seriously by the academic community. Furthermore, the Enlightenment's deep distaste for anything deemed irrational is the precise reason why magic and esotericism have been understudied and outright dismissed in academic circles until very recently. Literature has often captured this truth better than philosophy. The cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft embraced the concept of madness, showing a vision of the divine that is intentionally as irrational and terrifying as possible, hitting upon major mystical insights regarding human insignificance within the broader cosmos. The integration of the Norse Pantheon serves as a vital corrective to the Hermetic over-reliance on the Logos. The Norse gods are not omnibenevolent, entirely rational architects. They are bound by fate, susceptible to passion, and intimately acquainted with the chaotic forces of the Jotuns. Loki, the trickster, embodies this necessary irrational chaos. He is the volatile catalyst that prevents the cosmological structure of Asgard from stagnating into rigid, lifeless order. By integrating these primal, irrational elements with the structured methodologies of Hermeticism, the practitioner achieves a holistic spiritual technology that accommodates both the intellect and the profound, untamable depths of mystical ecstasy. In classical Hermeticism, the descent of the soul into the physical world is conceptualized as a tragic consequence of pride. The souls became prideful, seeking equality with the highest gods, which displeased the divine. As a consequence, God instructed Hermes to construct physical bodies to imprison these souls as a form of punishment and instruction. The souls were informed that their terrestrial existence would be marked by suffering, but if they managed to live worthily of their divine origin, they would eventually return to the heavenly realm. Failure to achieve this gnosis results in the cyclical trap of repeated reincarnation on Earth. Within modern Western esotericism, addressing this imprisonment requires the alchemical balancing of the individual's psychological and spiritual elements. The original intent of Hermetic magic, a technology frequently borrowed and adapted by modern witchcraft and occult traditions, is the creation of a deeply balanced, highly integrated personality. This elemental equilibrium is not a mere psychological exercise, it is an absolute esoteric prerequisite. Engaging in advanced forms of magical study without a balanced personality inevitably results in severe mental and emotional instability, as the increased energetic load shatters the unintegrated ego. The Hermetic system categorizes this psychological composition of the adept into 4 classical elements, each requiring rigorous observation and careful regulation. The Norse cosmology, defined by the primordial clash of extreme elements in Ginnungagap, provides a superb mythological overlay for understanding this internal balancing act. Fire represents the will, passion, martial drive, and vital energy. An imbalance weighted too heavily toward fire results in an individual who is exceedingly rash, irritable, and hot-headed. In the Norse context, this is an over-identification with the destructive aspects of Muspelheim, or the uncontrolled rage of the berserker. Water represents profound emotion, intuition, empathy, and the depths of the subconscious mind. An excess of water leads to a sensation of crushing heaviness, profound emotional instability, lethargy, and clinical depression. Air represents the intellect, communication, rational thought, and the Hermetic logos. An overabundance of air traps the practitioner entirely within the confines of their own head, leading to severe anxiety, analysis paralysis, and a complete disconnection from physical reality. Earth represents the physical form, material stability, and endurance. While absolutely necessary for grounding esoteric energy, excessive earth energy leads to spiritual stagnation, stubbornness, materialism, and an inability to adapt to the changing currents of word. The following outlines the symptomatology of elemental imbalances and the corresponding Norse deities that the adept must utilize in ritual to restore esoteric equilibrium. Elemental imbalance. Excess fire. Symptom of energetic excess. Severe irritability, rashness, uncontrolled aggression, spiritual and adrenal burnout. Ritual antidote. Mediating Norse deity. Frigg, air, soften, water and earth. Mechanism of integration and balancing, invoking cooling, healing feminine principles to soothe the inflamed ego, grounding the vital force via domestic and hestial focus. Elemental imbalance, excess water. Symptoms of energetic excess, crushing depression, emotional volatility, lethargy, inability to establish psychic boundaries. Ritual antidote or mediating Norse deity, Thor, fire and earth. Mechanism of integration and balancing, utilizing active, structuring martial force to build impenetrable psychic boundaries and channel emotional currents into constructive physical action. Elemental imbalance, excess air. Symptoms of energetic excess, over-intellectualization, paralyzing anxiety, detachment from the body, neurosis. Ritual antidote mediating Norse deity, Njord, Freya, earth and water. Mechanism of integration and balancing, grounding the frantic mind in the physical senses, connecting with nature, material wealth, and the tangible, sensual aspects of the Vanir. Elemental imbalance, excess earth. Symptoms of energetic excess, immobility, stagnation, stubbornness, spiritual apathy, hyper-materialism. Ritual antidote mediating Norse deity, Odin, Loki, air and fire. Mechanism of integration and balancing, introducing intellectual friction and chaos, seeking disruptive new knowledge, and utilizing trickster energy to shatter rigid paradigms. To operationalize the Norse Pantheon within a Hermetic context, the practitioner must move beyond standard mythological summaries and engage with the deities as complex archetypal forces. This requires deep, scholarly research and the synthesis of historical grimoires with modern psychological frameworks. Odin stands as the quintessential embodiment of the magician archetype within this framework. Unlike the static, omniscient, and morally perfect creator deities of monotheistic traditions, Odin is fundamentally incomplete. He is a perpetual seeker of gnosis. He represents the active, relentless pursuit of wisdom, continuously seeking knowledge from the various entities, spirits, and seers that populate the Norse cosmos. His pursuit is inherently sacrificial and hermetic in nature. He understands the law of equivalent exchange. He willingly suffers and pays a steep personal price to expand his esoteric understanding. One of the most potent esoteric symbols in Odin's lore is his interaction with the well of Mimir. To drink from the waters of ultimate wisdom, Odin sacrifices an eye, permanently altering his perception of the physical world in exchange for profound inner vision. Mimir, an Aesir renowned for understanding second to none, acts as the guardian of this deep subconscious repository. This mythological narrative aligns perfectly with the Hermetic alchemical process. The imagery of the Norse serpent Jormungandr, who encircles Midgard and bites his own tail, is directly analogous to the alchemical Ouroboros. As psychologist Carl Jung identified, the Ouroboros symbolizes the mysterious circulation of chemical substances within the hermetic vessel during the process of alchemical distillation. Jung viewed this alchemical process symbolically as the profound thought of devouring oneself to turn oneself into a circulatory, self-sustaining process of individuation. Odin's sacrificial rites, hanging himself on the world tree for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, to receive the runes, are enacted entirely within this hermetic vessel. He breaks down the boundaries of his own ego to circulate the divine energies of the cosmos, transforming the raw material of the psyche into refined spiritual gold. For the practitioner, invoking Odin is not about seeking a paternal savior, but activating the internal magician who is willing to undergo the rigorous alchemy of self-transformation. It is also crucial to understand Odin's transient nature. Practitioners frequently report that their connection with Odin may suddenly disappear after a prolonged period of intense interaction. This phenomenon is often misrepresented as abandonment or spiritual failure. However, within the esoteric understanding of the framework, the wandering god withdraws precisely when the specific lessons he was imparting have been successfully integrated into the adept's psyche. Once the practitioner no longer needs the direct intervention of that archetypal force, the deity steps back, forcing the individual to stand in their own sovereign power. The adept must remain open to the fact that these forces may return later when a new threshold of spiritual evolution is reached. While Odin represents the esoteric pursuit of hidden wisdom, Thor represents the active, stabilizing force of the cosmos. In Hermetic mapping, if Odin is the volatile, expansive energy, Mercury and air, Thor is the coagulating, grounding force, earth and fire. Thor upholds cosmic fairness, actively calls out injustice, and provides the brute spiritual strength necessary to implement the magician's will in the material plane. In the context of the Hermetic soul's fall into matter due to pride, Thor acts as the great equalizer. The immense pride of the human ego must be shattered before true spiritual progress can occur. Thor's mythological archetype fundamentally rejects submission to tyrannical paradigms. As commentators have noted when comparing pantheons, the Christian framework operates under a jealous god who demands absolute submission and acknowledges no other deities. In stark contrast, Thor refuses to bend the knee to such paradigms, embodying an archetype of unyielding spiritual sovereignty. He defends the realm of Midgard, the human microcosm, from the chaotic forces of the Jotuns, the destructive, unintegrated elements of the shadow self. By working with Thor, the practitioner cultivates the massive resilience required to maintain equilibrium amidst the turbulent forces of spiritual awakening. Balder, the glowing golden entity of the Norse Pantheon, aligns closely with the Hermetic concept of the solar center, mapped conceptually to the Sephira of the Tiferet on the Kabbalistic tree of life. Balder is characterized by immense charm, kindness, and divine radiance, representing an idealized state of purity and harmony that is almost too good for the harsh realities of the material world. He wears the finest armor, protected by oaths extracted from all creation by his mother, Frigg, ensuring that virtually nothing can harm him. Balder represents the spiritual ideal, the illuminated soul that the practitioner strives to cultivate and fiercely protect from the cynical, destructive forces of the lower ego, represented by the machinations of Loki that ultimately lead to Balder's demise. The divine feminine within this framework is most potently represented by Frigg, the All-Mother, and the 12 Aesir goddesses, such as Sjofn, the Peacemaker, Air, the Healer, and Vor, the Wise Woman. The Norse goddesses govern the vital aspects of life, health, intuition, and domestic harmony. They provide the absolutely necessary counterbalance to the martial and intellectual rigors of the male deities. Trance working with these goddesses allows practitioners to develop profound spirit-work relationships, opening channels for deep psychological healing, emotional regulation, and esoteric peacemaking within the fractured components of the self. The approach to prosperity governed by the feminine divine in this framework shares profound similarities with other ancient traditions, such as the veneration of the Hindu goddess Lakshmi. Like Lakshmi, the Norse goddesses of abundance teach that true prosperity is not merely financial wealth. It includes vibrant health, profound love, expanding knowledge, and unceasing spiritual growth. Furthermore, these archetypes inherently test the worthiness of those who seek their favor, withdrawing their presence and blessings from households or internal psychic environments where greed, injustice, and elemental imbalance reign. Navigating the Norse pantheon requires an understanding of the specific temperaments of the gods, which differ significantly from deities in other traditions. For example, practitioners of Hermetic, Egyptian esotericism often note that deities like Bastet offer gentle support, while Sekhmet provides direct, no-nonsense guidance that challenges passivity but stems from a place of love. The Egyptian pantheon generally feels warm and welcoming to its adherents. Conversely, the Norse pantheon frequently induces a state of heightened anxiety and hypervigilance in the practitioner. Engaging with Odin, Thor, or Loki requires the adept to remain highly alert, continuously guarding their psychic boundaries and analyzing their own motivations. The Norse deities do not coddle the practitioner. They demand excellence, resilience, and the absolute willingness to face harsh truths, perfectly mirroring the unforgiving landscape from which the mythos originated. Divination within the Norse Hermetic framework transcends mere fortune-telling. It is a highly sophisticated system for aligning the practitioner's conscious awareness with underlying universal forces. This practice is deeply rooted in Platonic philosophy, specifically the concept of anamnesis, the idea that all true knowledge is not learned, but remembered by the eternal soul. In this context, divination uses imagination, phantasia, as an active operative interface between inner archetypal images and the external forces of the cosmos. The Futhark runes, the ancient written language of the Norse, serve as the primary divinatory and operative tools within this system. In advanced magical paradigms, runes must be understood conceptually as hermetic elementals, concentrated, pure packets of specific vibrational energy. They are the building blocks of reality. When a rune master, often functioning in a role akin to an asatru godi, carves these symbols, they are not merely writing words, they are anchoring vast cosmic principles into the dense material plane. By carving the runes, the practitioner incorporates their concentrated will into persistent, ambient magic that continuously influences the environment. The application of the runes in divination allows the adept to bypass the rational, linear constraints of the mind, logos, and access the deeper intuitive currents of the cosmos, facilitating the direct reception of gnosis. Beyond the traditional Futhark, highly innovative divinatory systems can be developed by analyzing the major figures of the Norse pantheon alongside their primary artifacts. By isolating the core traits represented by these items, a practitioner can construct a divinatory matrix that mirrors the structural complexity and psychological depth of the tarot. The items utilized by the gods are physical manifestations of their divine will and function. Just as the tarot utilizes archetypal imagery to trigger psychological reflection, a Norse artifact system allows the practitioner to evaluate their current circumstances through the lens of specific divine traits. The construction of such a system requires deep meditation and physical engagement. An adept might spend months analyzing each artifact, ultimately crafting the divinatory tools physically, such as cutting a large wooden dowel into distinct pieces to serve as casting lots. The following provides an esoteric mapping of key Norse artifacts and their divinatory applications within a Hermetic framework. Divine Artifact: Mjolnir, the hammer. Associated deity: Thor. Hermetic esoteric principle: martial earth, fire, boundary enforcement. Divinatory meaning and actionable application: indicates the immediate necessity for protection, the enforcement of strict boundaries, or the application of stabilizing force against chaotic elements. Divine Artifact: Gungnir, the spear. Associated deity: Odin. Hermetic esoteric principle: directed will, air, piercing illusion. Divinatory meaning and actionable application: represents absolute focus, the fulfillment of oaths, and the need to pierce through deception to acquire hidden gnosis, target identification. Divine Artifact: Bree Sing Amin, the necklace. Associated deity: Freya. Hermetic esoteric principle: value, magnetism, water and earth. Divinatory meaning and actionable application: signifies the accumulation of true worth, sexual or creative magnetism, and the requirement to understand the steep price of obtaining what one deeply desires. Divine Artifact: Gleipnir, the binding ribbon. Associated deity, the Aesir, Fenrir. Hermetic esoteric principle, restraint, paradox, binding. Divinatory meaning and actionable application indicates forces that appear weak but possess immense binding power, the need to restrain the destructive aspects of the shadow self, the wolf. Divine artifact, Skeed Bladnir, the ship. Associated deity, Freyr. Hermetic esoteric principle, adaptability, commerce, movement. Divinatory meaning and actionable application represents the ability to navigate shifting emotional or material currents, a tool that can encompass vast ambition but fold away when not needed. A core objective of this syncretic framework is the cultivation of a robust growth mindset, a psychological concept modernized by Dr. Carol S. Dweck, integrated deeply within ancient Hermetic wisdom. The magician archetype thrives on intellectual and emotional agility. Because the Hermetic principle of mentalism dictates that the mind is the primary tool of creation, the state of the practitioner's mind directly dictates the reality they manifest. A growth mindset within an esoteric context demands the absolute understanding that spiritual abilities, intellectual capacity, and emotional resilience are not fixed traits, but highly mutable qualities that must be expanded through deliberate practice, friction, and will. The gods themselves validate this. They are fallible. They make catastrophic mistakes, and they must actively work to stave off destruction. To nurture this agility, practical, disciplined methodologies must be implemented. A highly effective foundational practice is structured journaling. By setting aside 15 minutes each evening to write freely about the events of the day, the practitioner forces the subconscious to reveal itself. Over extended periods, this journal becomes an esoteric ledger, mapping the inner landscape of the practitioner's psyche, highlighting recurring emotional loops, and refining the magician's tools of insight. This practice intersects directly with the concept of intentional living, drawing a parallel to the philosophical reflections in wisdom texts like Ecclesiastes, specifically 2:13. There is fundamentally more gain to be found in wisdom than in folly, just as light is undeniably superior to darkness. Every single choice made by the adept acts as a small flashlight illuminating the road ahead, or, conversely, snuffs a light out, plunging them further into ignorance. Embracing wisdom means making highly intentional, thoughtful choices rather than succumbing to impulsive, ego-driven reactions. For example, choosing to communicate honestly in difficult situations is an action of applied Hermetic wisdom that fosters trust, whereas a hasty or unkind word born of an elemental imbalance causes entirely unnecessary conflict. Crucially, practicing this wisdom does not mean possessing absolute answers at all times. It is the commitment to a growth mindset where making honest mistakes retains immense spiritual value, providing those mistakes are followed by rigorous reflection and integration. A significant and pervasive peril in modern esoteric practice is the hyper-individualistic pursuit of absolute self-sufficiency. The magician archetype can easily be distorted by the ego into an archetype of extreme isolation. In the metaphysical community, there is a dangerous prevailing tendency to idealize practitioners who appear entirely self-reliant, operating under the grand illusion that they do not need others. This extreme self-sufficiency is esoterically bankrupt and psychologically damaging. A practitioner who believes they have no need for the support of local rune workers, experts in mythology, or specialists in purification rituals is simply adopting a posture of profound loneliness under the guise of mastery. Furthermore, a rigid, toxic adherence to a growth mindset about everything is entirely unrealistic and inadvisable. It ignores the natural Hermetic principle of rhythm, the pendulum swing of rest and action, and leads directly to severe energetic and physical burnout. A practitioner in the throes of burnout cannot effectively wield magic or absorb esoteric teachings. They become entirely ineffective. The adept must recognize that the occult market and metaphysical fairs are filled with advanced texts, such as comprehensive books on obscure topics like Ephesia Grammata, that go entirely unread by the masses. Knowledge is vast, and no single practitioner can hold it all. The Hermetic principle of correspondence dictates that the microcosm is inextricably connected to the macrocosm. Therefore, the individual practitioner is linked to the broader community. True spiritual growth requires the humility to acknowledge one's limitations and to seek communal support. The ultimate goal of applying the Norse Pantheon as a Hermetic framework is the manifestation of harmony and abundance. To achieve this, the practitioner must profoundly understand how to navigate the different types of spatial paradigms identified in mythological studies. Folklorist Lori Honko defined myth as an account of the beginning of the world and fundamental events, serving as a template for human action. Within this template, scholars identify two distinct spatial orientations, the Hermetic and the Hestial. The Hermetic space, deriving from Hermes, is characterized by perpetual motion, the crossing of boundaries, wandering, and the active, often dangerous pursuit of the unknown. It is the domain of Odin, relentlessly walking the 9 worlds in disguise. Conversely, the Hestial space, deriving from Hestia, is centered entirely on the hearth. It represents being at home, establishing safety, domestic harmony, and rootedness. A complete, healthy spiritual practice cannot exist solely in the Hermetic realm. Perpetual esoteric wandering leads to severe spiritual exhaustion, alienation, and a tragic disconnection from the tangible joys of human existence. The pinnacle achievement of this framework is developing the capacity to turn the Hermetic into the Hestial. The adept must take the lofty, abstract forces gathered during their Hermetic wandering and anchor them securely into their domestic life. This is achieved by becoming intimately familiar with one's environment, both internal and external, learning its energetic currents with absolute precision until it is known completely. This transformation is facilitated through the intentional sacralization of everyday tasks. By deliberately associating mundane chores with specific deities or treating daily actions as formal offerings, the practitioner grounds the high-frequency principles of Hermeticism into the solid bedrock of Midgard. The preparation of food becomes an alchemical process of bodily nourishment. Cleaning the home becomes a vital ritual of elemental purification governed by Frigg. The disciplined pursuit of one's career becomes a living demonstration of Thor's steadfastness and strength. By embedding the divine deeply into the domestic sphere, the practitioner invites a continuous, unbroken stream of abundance into their life. Because archetypes of prosperity, like the Norse goddesses and their cross-cultural equivalents, actively test the worthiness of the practitioner, they will immediately withdraw from environments dominated by greed, injustice, or chaos. Therefore, the maintenance of a balanced, sacralized Hestial space is the non-negotiable prerequisite for the sustained presence of true prosperity. To utilize this framework effectively, the adept must view their existence through the lens adopted by great Renaissance polymaths and occultists. Figures like Athanasius Kircher conceptualized the universe as a grand theater of the world, a vast interconnected mechanism reflecting the mind of God. Similarly, thinkers like John Dee saw absolutely no contradiction between the rigorous study of mathematics and science and his deep Hermetic and occult dealings. They were simply different languages used to describe the exact same pure verities of the cosmos. The practitioner of the Norse Hermetic framework must adopt this exact synthesized worldview. The runes, the Hermetic principles, the alchemical balancing of elements, and the psychological insights of the growth mindset are all tools operating in this grand theater. The exhaustive synthesis of the Norse Pantheon and Hermetic philosophy provides an exceptionally sophisticated, highly practical, and deeply resonant framework for advanced spiritual development. By intelligently combining the intellectual rigor, elemental structuring, and alchemical mechanisms of classical Hermeticism with the vitalistic, psychologically complex archetypes of the Norse mythology, the practitioner is fully equipped with a comprehensive system for total self-transformation. The successful implementation of this esoteric architecture relies upon the rigorous application of several strategic imperatives. 1. Embrace the alchemy of the self. The practitioner must fully adopt the archetype of the magician, embodied by Odin, recognizing that true gnosis requires profound sacrifice, the willing endurement of discomfort, and the absolute necessity of subjecting the ego to the circulating, transformative fires of the esoteric vessel. 2. Maintain strict elemental equilibrium. Prior to engaging in advanced divinatory or operative magic, the adept must meticulously balance their internal elemental composition, utilizing the specific energies of the Aesir and Vanir to counteract psychological extremes, prevents mental instability, and ensures a solid, enduring foundation for spiritual expansion. 3. Cultivate intellectual and emotional agility. The integration of a growth mindset is absolutely essential. Through disciplined practices such as daily analytical journaling, the adept maps their internal psychological landscape, recognizing destructive patterns of folly and actively choosing the illuminating, intentional path of wisdom. 4. Sacralize the mundane. True spiritual mastery is never measured solely by the frequency of ecstatic visions or hermetic wanderings, but by the ability to anchor those experiences into hestial harmony. By utilizing the faculties of fantasia and anamnesis, the adept turns everyday existence into an uninterrupted ritual of offering, thereby attracting and sustaining holistic prosperity, encompassing deep love, robust health, and expansive knowledge. 5. Acknowledge interdependence and community. The dangerous illusion of absolute self-sufficiency must be discarded in favor of community integration and humility. Recognizing the Hermetic law of correspondence ensures that the practitioner remains firmly connected to the broader human ecosystem, preventing the devastating burnout and profound loneliness that frequently afflicts isolated occult practitioners. The Norse Pantheon as a Hermetic framework is not merely an exercise in academic comparative mythology. It is an operative, highly functional technology of the soul. By approaching the Norse deities not as distant, mythic saviors, but as highly specific hypostases of universal laws, the adept can systematically dismantle the barriers of the lower self. Through this meticulous, disciplined application of Hermetic principles and runic methodologies, the reader is fully empowered to cultivate an enduring state of harmony, command a life of holistic abundance, and confront the inevitable, cyclical changes of fate with unwavering, enlightened sovereignty. Seekers, as we transition from the intellectual mapping of this framework to its operative application, we must prepare the internal landscape. The Norse Pantheon frequently induces a state of heightened anxiety and hypervigilance, so we must build a resilient vessel before engaging these forces. Begin by finding a comfortable posture within your hestial space. A place of safety, domestic harmony, and rootedness. Close your eyes. We will start by synthesizing breath and vital force, regulating the nervous system while maintaining your capacity for profound, vital action. Breathe in deeply and visualize yourself standing at the center of Midgard. Envision the massive intersecting architecture of Yggdrasil, the world tree, mapping perfectly onto the psychological structure of your own soul. invite the gaze of Odin or the structuring force of Thor, you must achieve strict elemental equilibrium. A shattered, unintegrated ego cannot withstand this energetic load. Focus your mind on the 4 pillars of your elemental constitution. Observe the fire within your psyche, representing your will, passion, martial drive, and vital energy. Acknowledge the water within, representing your profound emotion, intuition, empathy, and the vast depths of your subconscious mind. Feel the circulation of air, representing your intellect, communication, and rational thought. Ground yourself in the earth, representing your physical form, material stability, and the endurance necessary to hold esoteric energy. As these elements harmonize, remember that the gods of the North do not coddle the practitioner. They demand excellence, absolute resilience, and the willingness to face harsh truths. Draw your awareness to the center of your being, activating the internal magician. Commit to the pursuit of hypnosis, knowing it requires profound sacrifice and the willing endurement of discomfort. You are now balanced. You are now sovereign. When you are ready, open your eyes and return to the material plane. Thank you for joining me, Christopher Little, in the Library of Divine Echoes today. As you step back into the currents of your daily life, remember that true spiritual mastery is never measured solely by the frequency of your esoteric wanderings or ecstatic visions. It is measured by your ability to anchor those high-frequency experiences into your hestial harmony, the solid bedrock of Midgard. I challenge you this week to actively sacralize the mundane, treat your daily chores as formal offerings, and view your career as a living demonstration of Thor's unyielding strength. By viewing your existence as a grand theater of the world, you transform everyday actions into uninterrupted rituals that attract holistic prosperity. Until we open these tomes again, maintain your elemental equilibrium, cultivate your intellectual agility, and confront the cyclical changes of fate with unwavering, enlightened sovereignty. Farewell, seekers.